Today, we're looking at a green ink by Sheaffer Green. Now, as always, there's timestamps down below so you can skip around, but it really does help me out if you check out the entire video. If you're interested in other green inks, there's links to that down in the description, a playlist of green inks as well as other colors. If you don't know me, hi, I'm Adam, and I'm an ink guy, and if you do know me, welcome back. To standardize some of the writing samples, the first three are always done on Clairfontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper. Let's take a look at the first one, 90 GSM Clairfontaine. We have no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, some spots of shading. Like the R and the N in green are both a bit darker. Sheaffer gets a little darker at the end of the word. Extra fine is about the same tone as the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, some spots of shading going on. You look brown is a bit lighter as a word, and lazy is quite a bit darker as a word. 3 seconds to dry. Medium is the same tone as the extra fine, with no feather spread, halo sheen. The shading is much nicer here. Quick starts a little darker, gets a little lighter, and a bit darker again. Brown is very dark, where lazy is quite light. 5 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both do show some good color variation, and we get it in the writing. The smear test, you could likely recover it if you smeared while you were writing. To make sure there's a range of experience with this ink, all of the writing samples are always done with this Jinhao 159 with a 1.1, this Jinhao X450 with a medium, and this Jinhao X750 with an extra fine. Then a Lamy All-Star with a broad nib was inked up, used for day, and used to take the notes for this video. Now, let's take a look at the second standard paper, 52 GSM Tomoe River. We have no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, or shade. The extra fine is the same tone as the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade. 7 seconds to dry. Medium is just a tad, barely darker than the extra fine. With no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, 10 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both do show some color variation because the scrubby's a liar. We're not really getting it in the writing, and the smear test, you probably can't recover it if you smear while you're writing. I agree with Vita. There's a lot to learn by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. A line of ink is put down, and then it's put in the water for 10 to 15 seconds. And we see that this green is really pushing its way up, starting very light because it's moving away from that water, not resistant at all. But there is a thin blue line all the way across the top of this, showing that this ink should have some more depth than it does. The one on the right is allowed to dry for 10 minutes before it dunks into water. That green pushes its way up, and we still see that thin blue line across the top. Ultimately, these two chromatographies look the same, which makes me feel there's going to be no real resistance here. The last standard paper is 80 GSM Rhodia dot pad. We get no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, spots of shading like the top of the G in green, the N in green, the R in Sheaffer. The extra fine is a tad lighter than the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, moments of shading like the Q and the K in quicker, nice midtones, while the rest of the word is very light. Jump goes from light to midtone. 4 seconds to dry. The medium is a little darker than the extra fine, not quite as dark as the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, no real shading to show here. 6 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both do show some color variation, much more than we get in the writing, especially in the medium. The smear test says you could likely recover it if you smear while you're writing. Resistance tests are done to see how this ink can be expected to perform on the page, and more importantly, how hard it may be to clean from your pen. This smear is allowed to dry for 3 days before testing it. Looking at the highlighter, it handles itself fairly well. It's got no real blowout. It does get just a little bit wider, a tiny bit of spread, but all of the information is safe, making it good to use in a note-taking situation. That's very surprising when you look at what happens with water, which is largely reactivating and lifting it off of the paper. But we have a bunch of that green still there. It did only take water to get this out of my pen. Pen flush is doing quite a bit more than water did with only 30 seconds, where you're seeing a lot of white of the paper coming through. And 1/3 bleach solution, although you're not going to need it, does completely obliterate it off the page. Additional writing samples are done on papers that change up from video to video in order to expand some of the experience with these inks. This next paper is Namasanine paper. We have no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, a few spots of shading, like you see at the bottom of the S or the R in Sheaffer, the top of the G, the R, and the N in green. The extra fine is a tad lighter than the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, some decent shade spots. Look at quick starts lighter and gets darker, where brown starts darker and gets lighter. 4 seconds to dry. Medium is the same tone as the extra fine, with no feather spread, halo sheen, some spots of shading going on, like brown starts darker and works its way lighter. Fox goes from darker to lighter to darker, and 7 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both do show some good color variation. We get it in the writing, and a smear test, you could likely recover it if you smeared while you were writing. For the inks tested, the average viscosity was 2.5, with the realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9. Sheaffer Green has a viscosity of 1.88, making this a wet ink. If you're interested in how the viscosity is tested or how the bell curve is created, there's a link to that video down in the description. The next paper that we're going to take a look at is Leuchtturm 1917 Notebook. We have no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, moments of shading that go on, like the A and the R in Sheaffer, the N in green. The extra fine is the same tone as the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, spots of shading still, like the X in Fox, K in Quick, A in Lazy, all a bit darker. 5 seconds to dry. Medium is the darkest tone on the paper, with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, 7 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both do show some color variation left to right, though we're not getting it in the medium, and a smear test, you might be able to recover it if you smeared while you were writing. For the inks tested, the average dry time was 17 seconds, with the realm of normal being from 13 to 21 seconds. Sheaffer Green has an average dry time of 6 seconds, making this an incredibly fast drying ink. The last writing sample is done on 28-pound premium copy paper. The only bleed spot that we see happens at the scrubby, which isn't a big deal. Other than that, we have no bleeding and we have no ghosting. Very nice. The medium has some feathering all over it, tiny feathering, not the type that would stop most people from using this. It has no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. The extra fine is about the same tone as the medium. It has minor feathering, very, very minor. You look at the Q in Quick, the K in Quick, you get to see it some there. Not too bad. No spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. 1 second to dry. The scrubby shows some color variation, although we're not really getting it in the writing. And a smear test, you could definitely recover it if you smeared while you were writing. Instead of finding inks that look like Sheaffer Green, I would prefer to find an ink that complements that color on the page. I do like putting different types of reds, magentas, and pinks with green. I chose a nice Grink from Graf von Faber Castell, Electric Pink. So what do I think of Sheaffer Green? I think it was Obi-Wan that said something like, "This is not the green you're looking for." It is a bit turquoise leaning for me. Though it does give a bit of shading that is nice, it is the color that's just wrong for me. So what nib and pen would give the best writing experience with this ink? A medium flow broad or stub I think will help increase some of the shading that this ink has to offer, though still the tone for me feels a bit off. I hope you got something out of this video, and tomorrow we're going to take a look at Mont Blanc's JFK.